I'm going to start by admitting something most of us have felt. You see a cheap hand torch on a clearance rack, you think you've saved a bundle, and then a week later you're wrestling with an underpowered flame, a flimsy hose that kinks, or a nozzle that just won't hold its shape. The regret that follows feels almost inevitable, especially when the job you're tackling needs clean, precise cuts. So the question is, does the Hypertherm 059474 Pmx65/85/10575 hand torch assembly feel like a smarter buy? Or is it just another pricey piece that will end up gathering dust? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're looking at a plasma cutter torch assembly, you're really buying a conduit for power, a way to translate the machine's electricity into a focused plasma jet that can slice steel, aluminum, copper, and even exotic alloys. That's why the angle, hose length, and how the torch mates with your existing Pmx65, Pmx85 or Pmx105 matters more than the glossy marketing copy. The 75-degree swivel on this Hypertherm unit lets you get into tight corners without having to twist your whole arm, and the 50-foot hose gives you the freedom to walk around a large workpiece without constantly rep-lugging. In a real-world shop floor, that translates to less time fighting cable drag and more time actually cutting. Who should consider this torch? If you're a professional fabricator who already runs a Hypertherm PMX series machine, this assembly is essentially an upgrade that plugs right in. It's designed to match the voltage and amperage ranges of the Pmx65, 85, and 105, so you won't have to worry about compatibility headaches. It also makes sense for serious hobbyists who have invested in a Hypertherm cutter and need a reliable, long-reach torch for automotive restoration or custom bike frames. The extra 50-foot hose is a real benefit when you're moving a 12 by 24-foot sheet of steel on a rolling table. You can stay on one side of the shop and still keep the plasma arc steady. On the flip side, if you're a DIYer who only pulls a few cuts a month and you're still on the fence about buying a full-size plasma cutter, this assembly is probably overkill. The price point sits higher than generic aftermarket torches, and the value only materializes when you actually need the durability and ergonomic design that Hypertherm is known for. Likewise, anyone whose machine is a different brand will run into mounting issues. The connector geometry is specific to Hypertherm's PMX line, so it won't bolt onto a generic CNC plasma cutter without adapters. Let's talk about practical strengths that become obvious the moment you fire up the torch. The first thing I noticed was how the 75-degree swivel stayed locked in place even when I applied the kind of lateral pressure you get when you're trying to cut a stubborn piece of galvanized pipe. The swivel mechanism feels robust, and the metal housing doesn't wobble, a subtle but important detail when you're trying to maintain a consistent cut width of, say, 3 mm on thin sheet metal. The 50-foot hose also proves its worth in a larger shop. I set up a temporary cutting station on the opposite side of the room from the power source, and the hose maintained a steady flow of plasma without any noticeable voltage drop, which can be a real issue with cheaper, thinner hoses. Now for the hidden trade-offs. Because this torch is built for the PMX series, it carries a proprietary nozzle design that maximizes flow efficiency, but it also means you're locked into Hypertherm's consumable ecosystem. If you ever need to replace the nozzle or the ceramic cup, you'll be buying the OEM parts, which sit at a premium compared to generic equivalents. That's not a deal-breaker if you already have a stock of Hypertherm consumables, but it's something to factor into your long-term cost calculations. Another practical weakness is weight. The assembly, with its robust housing and longer hose, adds a couple of pounds compared to the ultralight aftermarket torches. For most bench work that's negligible, but if you're constantly moving the torch for on-site repairs, the extra heft could tire you out faster. Real-world use cases bring these points home. I used the torch to cut an inch steel bracket for a custom roll cage. The swivel allowed me to angle the torch down into a tight notch without the arm getting in the way, and the plasma arc stayed clean from start to finish. In another instance, I was trimming a 2-meter length of copper tubing for an industrial HVAC retrofit. The long hose let me stay safely away from the high-voltage cables while still delivering a precise cut that didn't deform the tubing's wall. Both scenarios highlight how the design choices angle, hose length, and Hypertherm-specific fit translate into tangible workflow benefits. If you're still debating whether to splurge on a branded torch versus a cheaper copy, think about the cost of a bad cut. A single miscut on a structural component can force you to start over, waste material, and delay a project. The Hypertherm.